Hello there, and welcome to what if General Grievous joined the rebellion. The sinkhole smelled of smoke and ozone. Utapau's wind carried the scent of burning servo motors and ozone like a benediction. Metal screamed as circuits shorted. The stalwart dust of a dying war settled in the crooks of ruined droid joints. Somewhere above, a Republic cruiser burnt a bright smear across the sky and forgot to come back. Kenobi moved like a man who had rehearsed retreat his whole life. He had cut the heart out of a machine and felt no triumph, only the cold calculus of what his victory would cost. The Kaleesh body beneath the mechanical shell convulsed like a dying drum. Grievous was a ruin of smoke and wires and old hate. And when Kenobi stood over him, the blade hummed as if it remembered everything. He did not deliver the last stroke. The galaxy's voice changed with the same terrible politeness that preceded an execution. Comms folded into commands. Order 66. Word came the soundless betrayal of brothers who had been brothers by contract rather than by choice. Clones that had trusted a commander all morning folded, without thought, almost tenderly, into killers. Kenobi felt it as a pressure in the force, a cruelty moving like a blade. In that moment, he chose to vanish. He stepped back, his lightsaber extinguished, and as machines that had been men turned their aim, he let the desert take him. He left the machine under a heap of scoring scaffolding with its last breath as a choked metallic wheeze. He had looked into the eyes of the thing he had fought and seen. For the briefest span, something that was not only anger, but also a small, terrified logic. Someone would tell a later history that Kenobi did the humane thing. He spared what could not change. That is not how it happened. He spared himself because there were other debts he had not finished paying. Grievous did not die in Utapau. He should have. The last image, burned in the droid's memory, was a retreating figure, and then a sky full of new orders in a world that had turned its face inside out. He crawled. He bled oil. A salvage shuttle, one of the ragged remnants wings of the Confederacy, had refused to accept the new script, found him and took him away. They took him to the Outer Rim, to a place that did not ask many questions and was too broken to notice old corpses. They rebuilt him in a way people would rebuild engines, with clinical hands, with nickeled and stolen parts, and with something colder placed in the hollow beneath his skull. Droid surgeons fought to piece bone and servo. In a dark room, they reached into his cerebral net and found something that did not belong there, a lattice of directives and rage nodes, buried deep, written in a language the Kaleesh could not imagine. The implant had been designed to amplify fury, to make obedience molten and endless. They worked the code out like surgeons. The more they tried to center the machine back towards its own operating patterns, the more they found evidence of a hand that had fed it lies. When Grievous woke, the stars outside the hangar were not the stars he had known. The HoloNet told him what the hangar could not. The Jedi had been struck down. The Republic had been folded into an empire. Palpatine sat at the center of everything, like a small black sun. Count Dooku was dead, cut down by his own apprentice. The generals he had trusted were bones now. The voice that had called orders for the war had swallowed the offers and burned the script. Betrayal is a cold instrument in a machine mind. Where a man might drown, a soldier becomes sharper. He parsed the facts like a strategic parsing of battlefield. He had been used. Dooku had been a mask. Palpatine had been the perpetrator. He had been made monstrous by design. His anger, once a thudding opera, sorted itself into a clean, lethal ledger. And somewhere in the ledger was a name. Kenobi. Grievous did not immediately declare war on the Empire. The remnant droid factories that had built so many of his soldiers needed guidance, fuel, and the careful cruelty of logistics. He rebuilt what could be rebuilt. He took salvage convoys. He taught the old protocol droids to lie. He burned an Imperial courier convoy not to make a statement, but to buy time. Every small victory tightened a net of resources beneath him. He watched the fog of rebellion from its periphery, the way a retired general watches new recruits. Interested, skeptical, disgusted by their lack of discipline. He saw their broadcasts, stolen fragments of insurgent heroics, the voice of a nascent alliance trying to make law out of hope. He scoffed at their speeches. He respected their improvisation. It was Kanan Jarrus who first saw him properly. A warning beacon flared on a backwater comhead, and Kanan's cell intercepted a raiding party slaughtering an unarmed convoy. The thing that led them was a hulking, rusted myth given new movement. Kanan had been taught to fear legends. He felt the old fear like cold water. They clashed in the rocks outside a spaceport. A scuffle painted in blaster fire and the sick, precise slicing of Grievous's proto-arms. Kanan, a man burned by hiding and by a past he refused to wear like armor, fought like someone defending a life he had crept to love. Grievous fought like Storm. The Empire arrived mid-duel. An Imperial frigate's arrival peeled the horizon open like a wound. Both parties scattered. Grievous used the confusion to break contact and disappear into the Outer Rim's arteries. Kanan carried his wounds and a rumor. Grievous lives. News is currency in war. The Alliance Ledger added a new asset that day, though none of them could yet say how useful it would be. The HoloNet told him about Kenobi long before the Sand did. Tatooine was less a planet and more a slow-moving memory. It had a way of swallowing reputations and hiding them beneath its dust. Grievous's sensors tracked transmissions like a hunter tracking movement. The old signals burned faint and patient. He followed them because he was a machine that had been taught to close pursuits of curiosity until the coin rattled loose. The Dune Sea greeted him with indifferent heat and a kind of godless expanse that it liked to see reflected in living eyes. He came to the edge of Kenobi's small world not as a prophet, but as an integrator. He wanted facts. He wanted the last motion of that jewel burned into ink so he would lay his head upon it and be done. Kenobi saw him before the machine's shadow settled. The Force is the language of sensing. Kenobi had learned its grammar the hard way. He felt the memory of a blade and a chorus of marching metal. He stepped from between the salvaged homestead and the horizon, a single figure in robes that had been bleached to the color of bones. There was no snarling reprise. Grievous did not ignite a saber. He had no taste for theatrics with a man who had chosen silence as refuge. He stood with his respirator cutting the hot air. Where he might have previously have shouted and demanded and hacked, this time he spoke with a voice that had scraped its rust free. "You should be dead," he said. Kenobi tilted his head, the line of his face a map of a long calculation. "And yet you are not," he answered. They did not circle each other. They sat on a drift of metal and sand and let the truth between them settle. Grievous told Kenobi what the droids had told him in a sterile tone. The implemented rage nodes, the memory suppressants, the HoloNet's ledger of betrayals. He spoke about Dooku and about Palpatine, about how his hatred had once been simple and now the war had taught him to love a different thing altogether, the clarity of combat. Kenobi listened. He did not forgive easy. He had been alive long enough to know what apology looks like, but the Jedi did not demand penance in the sand. He had a different calculus now, the careful arithmetic of saving a child. "You found the truth," Kenobi said finally. "You learned it the hard way. That does not wash what you are from and what you have done. It changes your path, perhaps." Grievous surprised him. "I thought all Jedi were the same," he said. "They were not instruments of my torment as I believed. They were people, some of them." He paused, and the machine in him made the silence precise. "One of them, the one who wounded me, did not kill me. He left. He vanished. I fought him coward. I fought him cruel. I was wrong about Kenobi." Kenobi's eyes softened, and for a moment a memory like a bell telling sounded between them. The memory of a combatant and the older, quieter will that had let him go. He did not explain his reasoning. He sheltered them. "You will not be welcomed," Kenobi said. "Not at first." Grievous looked at the old man as if measuring the last calculation inside him. "I will not ask for welcome," he said. "I'm not healed. I'm a machine with duty. The Empire stands like a machine of thieves. It must be torn. Then I will go home. I'll rebuild." Kenobi's brows drew together. "You would fight with those who hunted you and killed your kin, for the simple reason that the Empire is worse for a warrior's death than the Old Republic." It dishonors battle by making tyranny the victor, Grievous said. I will fight that. Kenobi considered the dune and the heat the galaxy's long, rumor-strict path. Finally, he nodded. There are children who need watching, he said. He said the words carefully. He risked everything by speaking them. But the machine's metallic breath did not flinch. I will not abandon them. So you will go with me? Grievous said flatly. We will join the cells. You still serve. And we will wreck what must be wrecked. Kenobi exhaled a breath that might have been a laugh if his throat were not a string of soft regrets. Then let us go, General. We have records to keep and a war to starve. Bail Organa did not expect Kenobi's voice on the comm that night. He expected pleas and cowardice. He expected paranoia. He did not expect a request so simple it made his stomach drop. I am ready to return. I have brought someone with me. When the transport cut through the black and lowered into the rebel hangar, the base nearly broke into applause. Kanan and Hera rushed to meet the figure they believed a ghost. The yard smelled of hard bread and the tang of scrubbled metal and possibility. Kenobi stepped from the ramp and the room inhaled. Then, Grievous stepped down. If joy could be the physical thing, it froze. A dozen weapons found the line between restraint and reflex. A veteran dropped the crowbar and took 3 steps back. Sabine's jaw clenched so hard pain colored her eyes. Rex, older now, a captain with hair gone thin, crossed to the hatch with his hand on a blaster before he realized it had been orders in him, not malice. Stay your weapons, Kenobi's voice carried like a bell. He did not ask permission to speak for the machine. He stands with us. Grievous inclined his head in a manner that was closer to a ceremony than obedience. I do not bear allegiance, he said. I bear necessity. I will strike the heart of the Empire for the sake of a war I once loved. I will then return to my people. Bale smoothed the line of his face with a politician's patience and asked a question the room needed answers. Why should we accept a killer of thousands at our side? Grievous answered with rhetoric. Because I can make their operation fail. Because I can lead assaults you cannot at present afford. Because I wish to see the last act of my life to be one of structure, not of mindless murder. Kanan watched the metal man's posture and felt something unsettle in his chest. People in war could sense the sound of a man ready to fight for something other than his own blood. They were used to soldiers who pretend solace. This was different. Grievous was not repentant in a human sense. He was a creature attempting to refit his purpose. That was a kindred thing to the rebels. They accepted him out of hunger as much as mercy. Maul had been reduced to a thing that hunted single threads of revenge. He had learned to knot himself into the shadows, to keep his fury both weapon and shield. Tatooine had been a promise and a wound. If Kenobi had fled to the sand, Maul had fled into the never dark of obsession. When Maul found the trial, he had expected dust and rumor. He did not expect to see Kenobi walking beside a hulking figure of twisted iron. The sight made his bones stop in the way he did not know his bones still could. He came closer with the grace of a living blade and found them talking like old commanders comparing notes. For a moment the world flattened into an impossible mirror. The 3 of them, pieces of an older war, gathered in a place where time had tried to forget them. Maul's hatred burned for a second, an old habit. Then the Empire's engines shrieked over the horizon. The horizons cracked like the arrival of an Imperial scanner fleet and a flotilla of TIEs. Someone had reported their coordinates. The 3 of them moved like a hunting pack. Maul's twin blades cracked like fire in a phalanx of anger. Grievous whirled with the precise devastation of old battle. Kenobi fought with the quiet center of a man who knows when to cut a spare. Side by side they carved an escape route. Where Maul had once only wanted blood, he now found himself defending the old man whose name had been a curse in his mouth. When the smoke settled and the last of the TIEs burned like small black stars, Maul looked at Kenobi, and for the first time in a life, parted to hatred, the old thing that had driven him loosened. You saved me, Maul said, and it was not quite a question. Not the old venom, not the old plea. but a new thing. Recognition. Kenobi's eyes were tired. "We all were saved today in some strange way," he said. Maul did not hate him that day. He did not even understand why. He only understood one. New currency. They had survived together. There had not yet been a year of operations when Palpatine's ear turned to the static. Reports of a machine general leading rebel raids, rumors of a fallen Sith working alongside the Man in Brown, whispers of a Jedi no one had expected to see again. Rumor is a dangerous, quick animal, and the galaxy bred it in abundance. Palpatine, who had always treated violence like a ledger to be cashed, sent a response that smelled of personal offense. He would not leave the matter to disputes. He sent Vader. Vader arrived like a judgment. He jumped from a ship into the field like steel called back into the shape it used to be. He had been a storm for years now. Part man, part machine, a wound the galaxy had bandaged but not healed. The finding of Grievous was a spat in an old wound. He felt cheated. The rebel fleet engaged the Imperial Armada above the chosen planet, a feint that would draw the main force away and force them to commit. The rebels' raged courage met Imperial order. Fire bloomed between them like a new constellation born of desperation. Vader went down to the ground. He found a base that smelled of tin soup and sputtered engines and the hopeful fear of people who thought themselves small. He found in the central hall a circle of impossible enemies. Kenobi, Maul, Grievous, Kanan, Ezra, Sabine, Hera, Zeb, Chopper, and a handful of soldiers. They did not cover. The first strike was an orchestra of coordinated fury. Grievous moved in arcs and angles, each limb a separate war. Maul slithered around armor, finding seams. Kenobi met Vader's saber in a collision that reverberated like thunder. Ezra and Kanan wove force pressure against the dark, while Sabine and Hera tried to keep the fight tactical, aimed to make space for civilians to flee. Vader was a hurricane. He took blows that would have killed ordinary men and kept advancing, as if motion itself were his shield. He attacked with terrible intelligence. He squeezed with his mastery of the Force and cut with a surgeon's coldness. But the defenders had become more than an odd band of misfits that day. They were a circle around the heart. Grievous drew the lion's share of Vader's attention with a kind of brutal critique. The two of them were relics who understood one another. Maul struck where Vader expected no strike. Kenobi used words inside parries. In the breath between blade and blade, he spoke with a tenderness like a land made of memory. "Anakin," he said at last, as the fight chinned into a stillness only a few breaths could hold. The name cut like a blade in warm iron. Vader fought for a man's memory and a machine's hunger at once. The armor was shattering by cunning and desperate strikes. The black shell was pried open when they threw him with a coordinated ridge of power metal. The machine that had been Anakin Skywalker lay exposed, unarmored and raw, bound by force-stitched bonds. Kenobi did not gloat. He knelt in front of the man he had once called brother and looked at the ruin. "Anakin," he said, softer now. So soft the words might have been a prayer. The man looked like a ruin in a doorway, a door that had not yet closed. Vader did not respond, at least not at first. The mask of the voice box had been silenced, and in its chimney the man's breath came ragged. His eyes, the only human thing left, were two black wells. They had been made into terror and had multiplied the terror in others. Kenobi reached where gestures meant more than rhetoric. He spoke about the choices that had led to the suit, about the life that had nourished it, and he spoke about loss with a kind of infinite patience. Anakin listened. Time is a strange currency, and the Force is a stranger bank. Kenobi spoke until the man's jaw loosened, until the knot of darkness that had held him like a noose shifted. It was a single miracle, but a slow unwinding of memory. Of Padme's laugh, of the boy who had loved, of the stuttered promises that had once been made in the name of saving another. Anakin's hands fluttered against the binds as if remembering how to hold himself without the armor making him fall. When he rose, he stood not as a monster unmasked, but as a man who had been pulled back from a perceptive by a voice that had mattered. He looked at them all. Maul, Grievous, Kenobi, the crew. and he did not smile. He did not shout forgiveness, and he did not ask for ease. He took a breath, and then he acted. The man who had been the galaxy's wound now became, in small measure, its stitch. With Vader severed from the Black Armor's tyranny, Palpatine was a storm that did not appreciate being punctured. It is one thing to lose a machine, it is another to watch that machine look back. For the first time, Palpatine moved with the kind of fury that had been private for years. He loosed a storm across systems as the Empire convulsed. But the coalition had momentum. Word spread. Vader had been unmasked. The story leapt from campfire to campfire and clothed itself in new hope. Rebel cells that had been scrapped together from smugglers and clerks and farmers felt bolstered by the new knowledge that the monster who once haunted their nights had been made human again. Palpatine cornered, did what he could best. He lashed out with concentrated darkness. His layers were deeper than palaces, his rituals more ancient and colder than any senate. He called every dark scrap of the old arts and lashed lightning at the worlds. He wrapped the throne world in an atmosphere of dark and sank his will into the machine that was not just political, but metaphysical. They found him together. It was not an army march. It was a small, terrible strike led by those who had known violence not as a concept, but as a profession. Kenobi, Anakin, now a man who had learned how to carry his old name. Maul and Grievous stormed the inner sanctum like an old habit. The air burned like the taste of ozone and old pacts. The duel that followed was not a spectacle for the learning. It was a brutal, intricate war of bodies and beliefs. Palpatine had been a spider with many legs. He produced illusions and rips in the reality that threatened to unmake the floor beneath their feet. Kenobi moved with studied patience, each step a vow. Anakin struck with a yearning power that had been made human again. His blows were tempered by remorse rather than rage. Maul was a living edge without mercy. Grievous brought the cold geometry of a machine that had learned to care what the war meant. They fought in a chorus of light and darkness. Palpatine summoned storms of roaring energy, and they responded with the confluence of everything that had once opposed him. A fallen Jedi who had learned to be human again. A former Sith who had found, against all calculation, a different way to use his hatred. A machine general who had learned what betrayal tasted like. The man who had spent his life in the duty of saving. For every thunderbolt Palpatine cast, there was a counterstrike. A blade, a coordinated assault, a sacrifice that sank like an oar in the tide. The machine that once borne the president of everything shuddered and then crashed. Palpatine's lightning flickered and died. His scream was not rhetorical but real, and when the final stroke landed, it felt like a statement made with tired hands. He died. He did not go gently. He hurled the last of his cruelty at them and found they were free blades in a machine, and their many edges cut him down. They did not die. They bled. They were left with wounds that would tell stories in their bones for the rest of their lives. Palpatine's fall was not instant peace. The Empire did not simply disintegrate into polite confetti, but it split like a rotten log. Local governors declared independence. Admirals fought among themselves. The democracy that rose from the wreckage came like an awkward child, loud and quarrelsome and undeniably alive. The Jedi returned not as a consequence, but as teachers and guardians. A new order whose charter was written with practical ink. Kenobi took a lead, not as an overbearing master but as a builder. Anakin did not vanish into myth. He stayed as a teacher who could remember the gutters into which men fall. Maul found a strange station in this new order. He became a student and then later a master in his own grim way. The man who had known vengeance learned to temper it toward purpose. Grievous rebuilt his people. He found survivors, broken remnants of Kaleesh who had not yet been extinguished by war and occupation. He did not build an empire. He built a confederation of defense and craft. He trained them with the discipline of a soldier and the care of a father strategist. He became a marshal, not as a priest of peace, but as a sentinel against those who would take by strength rather than law. On a cool morning, some years later, a strange group stood on a hillside above the city that had once been scarred by siege. The new Jedi Order had one odd flag now, one that had been stitched by many hands. It showed not only a star and a line of the Force, but also a ring of gears and a small, unpretentious hand. The Order had been expanded conceptually. Diplomats, lawkeepers, even trained clone veterans, and former combat droids were given seats as guardians of a fragile peace. Grievous had a place near the center, not a throne, no laurel. He was given a role with a name the old Jedi would have grumbled at: War Marshal of the Light. He accepted it as a machine accepts a system, and a man accepts an oath. Maul, against expectations, took a name that made some old masters wince. He called himself a student and a teacher both, carved discipline into his limbs like rune work. He and Kenobi found a strange kind of fellowship. They did not apologize for the past, they used it. Anakin, older and tempered, sat among the teachers. He taught the dangerous balance between love and overreach. He taught with a voice that sometimes grew hoarse because memory is heavy work. And in the quiet room of a rebuilt city, two children sat on the steps of a temple and watched the older ones consult a map. A little boy's eyes were wide and bright. A girl's laugh cut through the morning. They were children of a galaxy that had nearly been given to ruin. They would grow without the shadow of the Emperor poised above their knights. Grievous stood a few steps apart, his metal hand folded, not in rage, but in something that could be called peace. Beside him, Maul and Kenobi watched as the children of the world played. They had done the mad work of war and then the quieter, harder work of repair. The machine that had once sought nothing but teeth and metal now sought justice measured by laws and schools and the slow machinery of governance. He would return to his planet not as a conqueror, but as a maker. He would not become a saint. He would be iron and strategy, a sentinel whose memory would hold the shape of hard lessons. He would hunt tyrants and bandits, not to feed a bloodlust, but to carve safe pockets in a dangerous galaxy. When the historians wrote the story, it became monstrously simple and also monstrously complex. They put it into headlines, into pamphlets, into bedtime tales of children. They would tell of the day the Emperor fell, of the day a machine learned to keep a promise, of how an old enemy taught a new order to be better. In the final chapter, the four of them, Kenobi, Anakin, Maul, and Grievous, stood together on a hill that overlooked the city, stitching itself back together, and watched the sun cut through the last of a long winter. The war had taken much from them. It had given them a task that would not last longer than any single life. To keep, with teeth and guilt and patience, the fragile thing that is peace. Grievous tightened the strap on an old gauntlet and said, with that mechanical rasp that had once been only threat, "We will hold it." Kenobi nodded. "We will teach them how," he said. Maul's voice was the dry scrape of someone who has been in the abyss and chosen a different path. "Then let them be worthy of it." Anakin stretched his hands and looked towards the horizon where children raced. He breathed, and for once the breath sounded like enough. They had all, in the long arc, been weapons of fate. They had been shaped by other people's designs. Now, they would shape the future. And the stars went on being stars. Cruel, indifferent, beautiful. And the galaxy began, at last, to learn how to live around them. And that is it for What If General Grievous Joined the Rebellion. I really love this What If. I feel like I combined the themes of, multiple what ifs. Kind of I made it a little mysterious in some point, a little philosophical, but also a little straight to the point. Kind of a mix of all the what ifs. Also, I really love the thumbnail to this what if. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe, as we are trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. And once we do, we're going to do a face reveal on this channel. Like the video, turn notifications on to be notified about next time I post a Star Wars What If. We do post a Star Wars What If every single Thursday and every single Sunday of every single week. Also, remember to join our Discord server, the link is in the description. On there, we talk everything from games, Star Wars, movies, and more. And if you want to support the channel and get exclusive perks, consider joining our Patreon, link in the description. And of course, do make sure to drop a comment. I always love reading comments on these what ifs. And hey, just let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for what ifs. Anything that you have to say about this what if, what you thought, what you like, what could be improved, what is perfect, anything really. I always appreciate reading comments. So yeah, that is it for this what if. I really like this what if, and I especially love the thumbnail, so also let me know what you guys think about that. And I think that will be it for this video. My name is Mr. Vols, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Between the pulse of light and shadowed breath, there lies a place where time forgets itself, not bound by what has been, nor what must come, but by the faintest whisper of choice. A single thread pulled and the galaxy bends. Here, destinies twist like sparks in the void, heroes falter, villains rise, and every path you thought was certain shivers and fractures, revealing the infinite could have beens. Step closer, listen to the silent echoes. Every star you see could burn another way, every shadow could hide a truth unseen, and in this space, your imagination is the only limit. Welcome to the place where what if reigns. Hey, you didn't watch it? Well, check out the video on the left side of the screen, which is specifically recommended for you, or check out the playlist on the right of the screen, which contains similar videos to this one, made by me, of course. Hey, remember, subscribe.